Zephyr had always known the harsh bite of winter wind, the unforgiving concrete beneath her thin blanket, and the gnawing emptiness of hunger. At 17, she was a veteran of the streets, her once bright eyes now wary and guarded. Her real name, long forgotten, had been replaced by the moniker given to her by fellow street dwellers, who marveled at her ability to slip away unseen, like a gentle breeze. It was on a particularly frigid November evening that Zephyr's life took an unexpected turn. Huddled in the shadows of a gleaming skyscraper, she watched as a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. A tall, distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit emerged, followed by a woman whose elegance seemed almost out of place in the gritty urban landscape. Zephyr tensed, ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. But instead of passing by like most well-to-do citizens, the couple paused, their eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Hello there," the woman said, her voice soft and warm. "Are you all right?" Zephyr didn't respond, her gaze darting between the woman's kind face and the man's unreadable expression. The woman took a step closer, undeterred by Zephyr's silence. "I'm Cordelia, and this is my husband, Alistair. What's your name?" For a moment, Zephyr considered lying or simply running away, but something in Cordelia's eyes, a mix of concern and something else she couldn't quite identify, made her pause. "Zephyr," she mumbled, the name feeling strange on her tongue in this context. Cordelia smiled, the expression lighting up her entire face. "Zephyr. What a beautiful name. Listen, it's freezing out here. Would you like to come with us? We can get you something warm to eat and a safe place to sleep for the night." Alarm bells rang in Zephyr's head. Years on the street had taught her to be wary of such offers. But as another gust of icy wind cut through her threadbare jacket, the prospect of warmth and food proved too tempting to resist. "Okay," she said cautiously, rising to her feet with the practiced ease of someone always ready to flee. The ride in the luxurious car was surreal. Zephyr sat stiffly, her worn backpack clutched tightly to her chest as the city lights blurred past the tinted windows. Cordelia chatted amiably, her melodious voice filling the silence, while Alistair remained quiet, his eyes occasionally meeting Zephyr's in the rearview mirror. When they pulled up to a grand mansion on the outskirts of the city, Zephyr's jaw dropped. She had seen nice houses before, of course, but nothing like this sprawling estate with its manicured gardens and imposing facade. Inside, the opulence was even more overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers, priceless artworks, and plush carpets that Zephyr was afraid to step on with her dirty sneakers. Cordelia led her to a guest room, larger than any space Zephyr had ever called her own. "You can clean up in there," Cordelia said, gesturing to an ensuite bathroom. "I'll have some clothes brought up for you. Take your time, and when you're ready, come down to the kitchen for some food." Left alone, Zephyr stood in the middle of the room, feeling like an alien who had suddenly been dropped onto a new planet. The hot shower was a luxury she hadn't experienced in years, and the soft, clean clothes felt strange against her skin. When she finally made her way downstairs, guided by the aroma of food, she found Cordelia in a state-of-the-art kitchen, placing a steaming bowl of soup on the counter. "There you are," Cordelia beamed. "Come, sit. You must be starving." As Zephyr ate, savoring each spoonful of the rich, warm soup, Cordelia watched her with an expression that seemed almost hungry. It was disconcerting, but Zephyr brushed it off as paranoia, born from years of street life. "Zephyr," Cordelia said as the girl finished her meal, "Alistair and I have been talking. We'd like to offer you a home here, with us." Zephyr nearly choked on her last spoonful of soup. "What? But you don't even know me." Cordelia reached out, gently taking Zephyr's hand in hers. "We know enough. We can see you're a smart, resilient young woman who's had a tough life. We want to give you the chance at the life you deserve." It was too good to be true. Things like this didn't happen in real life, especially not to street kids like her. And yet, here was this kind, wealthy woman offering her a lifeline out of the hell she'd been living in. "Why?" Zephyr asked, her voice barely a whisper. A shadow passed over Cordelia's face, so quickly Zephyr almost thought she'd imagined it. "Let's just say we understand what it's like to be alone in the world. We want to help, if you'll let us." And so, against every instinct honed by years of survival on the streets, Zephyr said yes. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Lawyers were called, papers were signed, and before Zephyr knew it, she was officially Zephyr Blackwood, adopted daughter of Cordelia and Alistair Blackwood. Life in the Blackwood mansion was like a dream. Zephyr had her own room, filled with books and a computer and clothes she would never have imagined owning. Cordelia hired tutors to help her catch up on the education she'd missed, with talk of college in the future. But as the initial shock and gratitude began to wear off, Zephyr started noticing oddities. The way Cordelia and Alistair would sometimes stop talking abruptly when she entered a room. The locked door in the east wing that no one ever seemed to enter. The hushed phone conversations Alistair would have in his study late at night. And then there were the nightmares. Vivid, terrifying dreams that left Zephyr gasping for breath. Images of dark rooms and muffled screams lingering in her mind long after she woke. She tried to brush them off as a result of the drastic change in her life, but a nagging feeling in the pit of her stomach told her there was more to it. It was a month into her new life when Zephyr first met Ilara. The girl appeared in the garden one sunny afternoon, her pale skin almost luminescent in the daylight, her long black hair a stark contrast. "Hello," the girl said, her voice soft and melodious. "I'm Ilara. You must be Zephyr." Zephyr nodded, struck by the girl's ethereal beauty and the sadness that seemed to linger in her deep blue eyes. "Do you live around here?" A small, enigmatic smile played on Ilara's lips. "You could say that. I've been watching you, you know. You're not like the others." Before Zephyr could ask what she meant, Cordelia's voice rang out from the house, calling her in for dinner. When Zephyr turned back, Ilara was gone, as if she'd never been there at all. That night, the nightmare was more vivid than ever. Zephyr found herself walking down a long, dark hallway, the sound of muffled sobs growing louder with each step. At the end of the hall was a door, the locked door from the east wing. In the dream, it swung open at her touch, revealing a room bathed in an eerie blue light. And there, in the center, was a girl who looked achingly familiar. Zephyr woke with a start, her heart pounding. The digital clock on her nightstand read 3:07 a.m. As she tried to calm her racing pulse, a movement in the corner of her room caught her eye. There, standing in the shadows, was Ilara. "You're starting to see, aren't you?" Ilara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need to be careful, Zephyr. Not everything in this house is as it seems." Before Zephyr could respond, Ilara seemed to fade into the darkness, leaving Zephyr to wonder if she was still dreaming or if she was slowly losing her mind. The next morning, Zephyr couldn't shake the feeling of unease that clung to her like a second skin. At breakfast, she studied Cordelia and Alistair closely, searching for any sign that might confirm her growing suspicions. But they were as kind and attentive as ever, Cordelia fussing over her breakfast and Alistair asking about her studies. "Is everything all right, dear?" Cordelia asked, noticing Zephyr's distraction. "You seem a bit off this morning." Zephyr forced a smile. "I'm fine, just didn't sleep well." Cordelia's brow furrowed with concern. "Oh, darling, are you still having nightmares? Perhaps we should speak to Doctor. Marlowe about adjusting your medication. Medication. That was another thing that had bothered Zephyr. Shortly after moving in, Cordelia had insisted she see a psychiatrist, doctor. Marlowe, who had prescribed her a cocktail of pills to help with adjustment and anxiety. Zephyr had been taking them dutifully, but now she wondered if they were the cause of her vivid dreams, or if they were meant to keep her from seeing something she wasn't supposed to. Actually, Zephyr said, making a split-second decision, I think I might skip the meds today, see if it helps with the dreams. A flash of something passed over Cordelia's face. Alarm, fear, but it was gone so quickly, replaced by her usual warm smile, that Zephyr almost thought she'd imagined it. If you think that's best, dear, but do let us know if you need anything. As the day progressed, Zephyr felt a fog lifting from her mind. Colors seemed brighter, sounds clearer, and the nagging feeling that something was deeply wrong grew stronger. That afternoon, while Cordelia was out at a charity event and Alistair was locked in his study on a conference call, Zephyr decided to do some exploring. She found herself drawn to the east wing, to that mysterious locked door that featured so prominently in her nightmares. As she approached, her heart pounding in her chest, she was startled by a voice behind her. You won't be able to open it. Zephyr spun around to find Alara standing there, looking as ethereal as ever. Who are you? Zephyr demanded. What do you know about this door? About the Blackwoods? Alara's sad smile returned. I know everything, Zephyr. I know what they do behind that door. I know why they brought you here. And I know that if you don't uncover the truth soon, you'll end up just like me. A chill ran down Zephyr's spine. What do you mean, just like you? What happened to you, Alara? But once again, Alara vanished before Zephyr's eyes, leaving her with more questions than answers. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Zephyr began to investigate in earnest. She searched the house when Cordelia and Alistair were out, looking for any clue that might shed light on their secrets. She eavesdropped on phone conversations, tried to crack the password on Alistair's computer, and even attempted to pick the lock on the mysterious door, to no avail. As days turned into weeks, Zephyr's suspicions grew. She noticed how Cordelia and Alistair would sometimes come home late at night, looking tired and oddly satisfied. She found strange receipts for medical equipment and overheard hushed conversations about subjects and trials. And all the while, Alara continued to appear, always with cryptic warnings and sad smiles. Zephyr began to piece together Alara's story. She had been another girl from the streets, taken in by the Blackwoods years ago. But something had happened to her. Something terrible behind that locked door. One night, unable to sleep, Zephyr crept down to Alistair's study. To her surprise, the door was ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the dark hallway. As she approached, she could hear Alistair's voice, tense and angry. We're running out of time, Cordelia, he was saying. The investors are getting impatient. We need results, and we need them soon. I know, Cordelia replied, her usual warm tone replaced by something colder, more calculating. But we can't rush this. Zephyr is different from the others. Her genetic makeup is extraordinary. If we can just unlock her potential, we'll have everything we need. Zephyr's blood ran cold. They were talking about her, about using her for something. But what? She was so focused on the conversation that she didn't notice the floorboard creaking under her foot until it was too late. The voices in the study suddenly went silent. Zephyr, Cordelia called out. Is that you, dear? Heart pounding, Zephyr fled back to her room, her mind racing with the implications of what she'd heard. The Blackwoods weren't her saviors. They were predators, and she was their prey. The next morning, Zephyr pretended everything was normal, forcing herself to eat breakfast and make small talk. But inside, she was formulating a plan. She needed to escape, to uncover the truth about what the Blackwoods were doing, and to find out what had really happened to Elara and the other girls who had come before her. As she was helping Cordelia clean up after breakfast, she deliberately dropped a glass, sending shards scattering across the kitchen floor. "Oh, I'm so sorry!" she exclaimed, bending down to pick up the pieces. "Don't worry, dear," Cordelia said, reaching for a broom. "I'll clean this up. Why don't you go get ready for your tutoring session?" But as Cordelia turned away, Zephyr palmed a large shard of glass, slipping it into her pocket. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a potential weapon, a way to defend herself if things went wrong. That night, Zephyr waited until the house was quiet before making her move. She crept down the hallway to the east wing, the shard of glass clutched tightly in her hand. As she approached the locked door, she was surprised to find Elara waiting for her. "You're ready," Elara said, a mix of sadness and pride in her voice. "But are you prepared for what you'll find?" Before Zephyr could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Panicking, she pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath as Alistair appeared, a ring of keys in his hand. He approached the door, seemingly oblivious to Zephyr's presence, and unlocked it. As soon as he disappeared inside, Zephyr darted forward, catching the door before it could close fully. Heart pounding, she slipped inside. The room beyond was like something out of a science fiction nightmare. Banks of computers lined the walls, their screens displaying graphs and data. Zephyr couldn't begin to understand. In the center of the room was a series of medical beds, each equipped with strange, high-tech devices. And there, strapped to one of the beds, was a girl who could have been Elara's twin. "Ah, Zephyr," Alistair's voice came from behind her, unsurprised and eerily calm. "I was wondering when you'd find your way here." Zephyr spun around, the shard of glass held out in front of her like a shield. "What is this place? What are you doing to these girls?" Cordelia stepped out from the shadows, her kind facade gone, replaced by a cold, clinical expression. "We're changing the world, Zephyr, and you're going to help us do it." As Cordelia launched into an explanation about genetic manipulation, about unlocking human potential and creating a new, superior race, Zephyr's mind raced. She thought of Elara, of the other girls who had come before her, of the life she had lived on the streets and the false promise of safety that had lured her here. And in that moment, something inside Zephyr snapped. With a cry of rage and desperation, she lashed out, the shard of glass glinting in the eerie blue light of the lab. Alistair dodged, but not quickly enough. The makeshift weapon sliced across his arm, drawing blood. Chaos erupted. Alarms blared, filling the air with a deafening shriek. Cordelia lunged for Zephyr, her face contorted with fury. But Zephyr was quicker. Years of survival on the streets had honed her reflexes, and she ducked under Cordelia's grasp, making a dash for the door. "Stop her!" Alistair roared, clutching his bleeding arm. But Zephyr was already racing down the hallway, her heart pounding in her ears. She could hear footsteps behind her, security guards no doubt, alerted by the alarms. She took a sharp turn, heading for the grand staircase that led to the main floor. As she reached the top of the stairs, a figure materialized in front of her. Elara, her blue eyes wide with urgency. "The basement," Elara's voice echoed in Zephyr's mind. "There's a way out through the old storm cellar. Hurry!" Without questioning the apparition, Zephyr changed course, darting down a servant's stairwell that led to the lower levels of the mansion. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter as she descended into the bowels of the house. The basement was a maze of dark corridors and storage rooms. Zephyr's eyes, accustomed to navigating dark alleys, quickly adjusted to the gloom. She could hear voices above, shouting orders, the thud of footsteps as the search for her intensified. "This way." Ilara's spectral form appeared again, guiding Zephyr through the labyrinth. Finally, they reached a heavy wooden door, rusted hinges speaking of years of disuse. Zephyr pushed against it with all her might, feeling it give way inch by inch. As soon as the gap was wide enough, she squeezed through, emerging into the cool night air. She found herself in an overgrown part of the estate's vast grounds, far from the manicured lawns and gardens she was familiar with. Without pausing to catch her breath, Zephyr ran, pushing through brambles and low-hanging branches, the sound of pursuit growing louder behind her. As she reached the edge of the property, a high stone wall loomed before her. For a moment, despair threatened to overwhelm her. She was trapped. But then she spotted it, an ancient oak tree, its sturdy branches reaching over the wall. With the last reserves of her strength, Zephyr scrambled up the tree, wincing as the rough bark scraped her palms. She could hear shouts now, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. Just as a beam of light fell on her, she reached the top of the wall and, without hesitation, jumped. The fall knocked the wind out of her, but Zephyr forced herself to her feet. She was outside the Blackwood estate now, on a quiet country road. In the distance, she could see the glow of the city. Freedom was within reach, but she knew she couldn't stop yet. As she ran down the road, a car approached. Zephyr tensed, ready to dive into the bushes, but the car slowed, and a familiar face peered out of the driver's window. "Get in, quickly!" It was Dr. Marlowe, the psychiatrist who had been treating her. Zephyr hesitated for a split second, her mind racing. Could she trust him? But the sound of pursuit was growing closer, and she had no other options. She jumped into the car, and Dr. Marlowe sped away, tires screeching on the asphalt. "I'm so sorry, Zephyr," Dr. Marlowe said as they raced towards the city. "I should have realized sooner what was happening. When I saw the results of your latest tests, I knew something wasn't right. I started digging and, well, let's just say the Blackwoods have been involved in some very unethical research for a long time." Zephyr's mind was reeling. The other girls, Ilara. Dr. Marlowe's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Ilara Blackwood. She was their daughter and their first subject. She died 5 years ago during one of their experiments. I think her guilt-ridden spirit has been trying to warn their victims ever since. As the city lights grew closer, Zephyr felt a mix of relief and dread. She was free from the Blackwoods, but she knew this was far from over. The things she had seen, the secrets she now knew, they would haunt her, drive her. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dr. Marlowe glanced at her, his eyes full of determination. "Now, we expose them. We save the other girls, and we make sure the Blackwoods can never hurt anyone again." As they drove into the city, Zephyr looked back at the fading silhouette of the Blackwood estate. She thought of Ilara, of the other girls still trapped there, of the life she had briefly tasted, and the harsh reality she was returning to. But this time, she wasn't alone. This time, she had a purpose. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Dr. Marlowe had connections in law enforcement and the media, and soon the Blackwood case was making headlines across the country. Zephyr found herself at the center of a storm, telling her story to detectives, journalists, and eventually, in a courtroom filled with shocked faces. The evidence was damning. With Dr. Marlowe's help, authorities raided the Blackwood estate, uncovering not only the secret lab, but years of records detailing their illegal experiments. Other survivors came forward, girls who had managed to escape over the years, but had been too afraid to speak out. Cordelia and Alistair Blackwood were arrested, their empire crumbling around them. As they were led away in handcuffs, Zephyr locked eyes with Cordelia one last time. The woman who had once seemed so warm and maternal now looked small and defeated, her cold eyes filled with a mixture of rage and fear. In the aftermath of the trial, Zephyr struggled to adjust to her new reality. She was hailed as a hero, offered book deals and interviews, but the trauma of her experiences lingered. Nightmares plagued her sleep, and she found it hard to trust anyone, always looking for hidden motives behind kind gestures. It was during this difficult time that she met Finn, a young social worker assigned to her case. Unlike the parade of reporters and lawyers she had dealt with, Finn seemed genuinely interested in her well-being, not just her story. Slowly, cautiously, Zephyr began to open up to him. "You know," Finn said one day as they walked through a park, the autumn leaves crunching beneath their feet, "you don't have to have it all figured out right away. Healing takes time." Zephyr nodded, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. I don't know who I am anymore. For so long I was just trying to survive. Then with the Blackwoods, I thought I had found a new life. And now..." Finn stopped, turning to face her. "Now you get to decide who you want to be, not based on what others expect or what you've been through, but on who you truly are inside." His words struck a chord in Zephyr. For the first time since her escape, she felt a glimmer of hope for the future. As the months passed, Zephyr threw herself into advocacy work, using her experience to help other vulnerable youth. She worked with organizations that supported homeless teens, spoke at conferences about the dangers of human trafficking, and even started a support group for survivors of abuse. Through it all, Finn remained a constant presence in her life, offering support and encouragement. Their relationship deepened, evolving from professional to friendship, and eventually to something more. Zephyr, who had once thought herself incapable of trusting anyone again, found herself falling in love. But even as she built a new life for herself, Zephyr couldn't shake the feeling that there was something left, unfinished. The memory of Alara, the ghostly girl who had helped her escape, haunted her thoughts. One crisp spring morning, Zephyr found herself standing at the gates of the Blackwood estate. The once grand mansion was now abandoned, its windows boarded up, the gardens overgrown. A for sale sign swung gently in the breeze, the realtor's phone number long since faded by sun and rain. Taking a deep breath, Zephyr pushed open the rusted gate and made her way up the overgrown driveway. As she approached the front door, a familiar figure shimmered into existence beside her. "You came back," Alara said, a soft smile on her translucent face. Zephyr nodded. "I had to say thank you and goodbye." Alara's smile widened. "You've done so much, Zephyr. You saved the others. You brought my parents to justice, and most importantly, you found your own path." "I couldn't have done it without you," Zephyr said, tears pricking at her eyes. Alara reached out, her spectral hand passing through Zephyr's arm, but leaving a sensation of warmth. "My journey is over now, but yours is just beginning. Live, Zephyr. Live for all of us who never got the chance." As Alara's form began to fade, Zephyr felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The ghost of the past that had been haunting her was finally at peace. She turned away from the mansion, walking back down the driveway with a new lightness in her step. As she reached the gate, she saw a familiar figure waiting for her. Finn, leaning against his car, a gentle smile on his face. "Ready to go home?" he asked, holding out his hand. Zephyr took it, intertwining her fingers with his. "Yes," she said, and for the first time in her life, she truly meant it. As they drove away from the Blackwood estate, Zephyr looked in the rearview mirror. For a moment, she thought she saw Elara standing at the gate, waving goodbye. Then the image faded, leaving only the empty road behind them. Zephyr turned her gaze forward, towards the future she was now free to build. She had been a street kid, a pawn in a dark experiment, a whistleblower, and now an advocate. But more than any of those labels, she was simply Zephyr, survivor, fighter, and finally, truly free. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Zephyr was excited to see where it would lead. She had faced the darkest secrets and emerged stronger. Now, with Finn by her side and the memory of Elara in her heart, she was ready to write the next chapter of her story. As the city skyline came into view, Zephyr felt a sense of peace wash over her. The past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had survived, she had grown, and now, finally, she was ready to truly live. The end of one journey was just the beginning of another, and Zephyr was ready to embrace whatever challenges and joys lay ahead. With a smile, she squeezed Finn's hand, looking forward to the future they would build together. A future free from shadows, secrets, and fear. As they drove into the heart of the city, the sun breaking through the clouds seemed to herald a new dawn, not just for Zephyr, but for all those whose lives she would touch in the years to come. The homeless girl who had been adopted into darkness had found her way into the light, and she was determined to help others do the same. And so, Zephyr's story continued, no longer a tale of survival, but one of triumph, hope, and the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome even the darkest of secrets.